was that? We got new music.
I was going to say, you hit me with a new intro.
Yeah, that wasn't me. That's StreamYard. So that's pretty good. I never heard that one before. All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Allen Ulrich, here with Bob Rose. How's it going tonight, Bob?
Oh, we're hanging in there. We had a little glimpse of spring up here today. I think we might have even hit 50 degrees for the first time since November, so I'll take it.
It was 72 today over here, 72 and sunny. We had some cold weather last week and this past weekend, but for the most part, it's been good. It's really been good. So, yeah, spring's coming. Don't worry.
Mm-hmm.
The groundhog didn't lie. And it's Mardi Gras time. We've got, they said today, for the next 8 days, they've got parades rolling because they had rain all day Saturday. So all the Saturday parades are rolling tonight and tomorrow. So, yeah, they'll have parades. Now, when I was a kid, we'd have 11 days of parades. But Super Cruise and insurance and just various things have caused many crews to shut down, so they don't parade anymore, and it's a shame because they had some really good ones that have disappeared. But have you ever been down here for Mardi Gras?
Yeah, I have. It was it was the year of Super Bowl 31.
Right.
We had tickets to go down. We decided we had no interest in the game, so. We sold our tickets off. Still took a financial hit, but not that bad. And just moved our airline and hotel reservations back for Mardi Gras. And came down. I remember giving away a lot of beads. That's all I'll say. We had a good time. Hell, I have a good time every time I come down there, no matter what the occasion is. So
absolutely. Well. My family is all geared up. My daughter's going to the Endymion Extravaganza for the second year in a row, so she'll be at that. My dad rode in Endymion for 30 years. I think it was 30 years, 79 to 2009. I think that was his run. So he still knows a ton of people. So he's going out there with my son on Saturday to go see Endymion. Then my family, my extended family and stuff, we're all going to be out at Toth. And I've ridden in Toth, and I like Toth a lot. So it's fun. It really is. But that's going to be about my sum total of Mardi Gras because I just don't have – I can only bring so many bags to St. Michael's because that's the school that recycles the beads. Man, I used to have so many bags of beads, and I have so many plastic cups. It gets to be so much. It's like you fight to get all this crap. You're like Mr. T starter kit because you got so many beads around your neck and everything that you walk around. People worry about book bags. How you walk with a hump? Well, you walk with your head hanging low because the beads weigh so much, and I'm just like. No, I can't do this anymore. No more. Anyway, well, we were kind of right. We had predicted last week that likely they will hire the defensive coordinator by Friday, which I think they did. Might have been Monday. They started hiring some defensive coaches. But they hired a special teams coach like immediately. I thought that would be the last hire, but it was actually before they announced Brandon Staley. I think Brandon Staley may have gotten hired this weekend.
Because they officially announced Nussmeier on Thursday or Friday morning. But like you said, Galliano's promotion was announced before even that. So technically, he was the first coordinator hired. Okay.
And then Staley must have been this weekend. I don't think it was yesterday. So my question is, we've talked about Staley changing the defense. It likely is going to be a 3-4 based kind of scheme, not like the 80s, but hybrid version of the 3-4 that you kind of what you saw in Los Angeles, the Chargers, and a little bit with the 49ers, and a lot what you see with the Eagles.
Yeah.
So what do you think? How do you think that impacts the Saints draft philosophy?
I think it impacts it tremendously. I mean, you talked about Staley's background. Staley is a Vic Fangio disciple. I mean, he came on with Vic with the Denver Broncos back in 2018, 2019. And Vic has always run a 3-4 ever since his USFL days. With Mora and the Philadelphia Stars. And then carrying that over, obviously, into the Dome Patrol era. And Vic hasn't changed too much of his philosophy since then because it still works. And Staley, as you pointed out, has run been part of a 3-4 scheme in Denver, in Chicago, ran it with the Rams, ran it with the Chargers, and ran a version of it with the 49ers. So there's no reason to expect that to change. So you look at the Saints roster right now, and who really fits that scheme? Demario Davis, he's one of those transcendent players. He's going to be able to fit into any scheme. But Demario's played for 13 years. He's 36 years old. The sands of that hourglass are running low. Pete Werner, I expect, will be a competent fit as an inside linebacker. But you don't have a big-bodied nose tackle. I know Brissy played really well at defensive tackle, but he's a lighter guy. He's more quickness than power. So he's going to be in an odd man front on early downs, especially. Brissy's going to be one of your power ends. The other power end is probably going to be Cam Jordan or maybe Carl Granderson. People are assuming Carl Granderson is going to be a stand-up rusher. I say think again. That's not really his style. He's a lighter 4-3 end, but he's still pushing 270. So that Saints prototype that we saw, Dennis Allen use for so many years was based off the 4-3 defensive schemes. So anybody who wants the Saints, who thinks the Saints are going to draft offense just because Kellen Moore's an offensive guy in the first round, I say no. I don't think so. You got to look at your defensive roster. Edge rusher is fairly deep, but not to give people Marcus Davenport, Peyton Turner, Isaiah Foskey flashbacks. But I very much see, the Saints going edge rusher again because Staley doesn't have anybody. He doesn't have a Khalil Mack. He doesn't have a Bosa. He doesn't have a Bradley Chubb that he had over in Denver. None of those guys on the Saints roster fit that profile. So I certainly see the Saints going with an edge rusher that will fit that profile. It definitely in the first 2 rounds, and it wouldn't surprise me. In fact, I expect it in the first round.
Yeah, I've seen some mock drafts. Well, of course, Abdul Carter. I did a mock draft, and there's no way Abdul Carter falls to 9. But in this particular draft, he did. And it was funny because as soon as he hits the 9, I'm getting trade requests. And this particular scenario, the Baltimore Ravens went full Mike Ditka to go get Abdul Carter. They gave me their entire draft for 2026 to get Abdul Carter at 9. I didn't even get their first round this year, but they were giving me 1 through 7 for next year.
Wow.
And I'm like, and he would fit their scheme. That's exactly what they would want. So it makes sense. But I'm like, no. I'm not passing this up. I would trade down, but not if Abdul Carter is sitting there. But a realistic player, I don't think the kid from Alabama, who they have going in the top 5, I don't think he's going to make it down there. Mikal, I don't have that.
The Georgia kid, Michael Williams.
Georgia kid, Williams. Okay. But the other defensive end from Georgia, a lot of people are now starting to mock. I saw Bucky Brooks, in fact, mock him to the Saints at 9. So that's a player I could see the Saints going for. On the other hand, if a lot of defensive players go off the board early, that means a lot of the offensive players slide. So now you're looking at Genty, players like Tyler Warren falling to them at 9. The big receiver from Arizona State, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. I should have written it.
That's all right. I can't pronounce his full first name, but Tet McMillan.
Tet McMillan, yeah, that's it, McMillan. So, there's just, you see a lot of positives coming to him, and one, and we're going to talk about these other assistant coaches because that's where I'm leading with this, Don. You're seeing a lot of offensive talent starting to slide to him. Some people looking at the left tackle from LSU as another example of a guy, and I'm like, 3 tackles in 4 years, 3 left tackles in 4 years. I don't know. I think we need to leave it alone for now and get a guard. If Penning stinks or Penning doesn't improve, because he improved, but if he doesn't make that next step up, then I'm looking at a left tackle in 2026. I think, and that doesn't mean we don't draft a left tackle in this draft, but it does mean I don't want to take a left tackle at 9, no matter how good he is. Yeah, I couldn't think of his first name, Calvin. I just know him as Tet because I call him the Tet Offensive. I'm sure I'm not the only one that calls him that, but yeah, that's just how I think of him. But yeah, so you have a lot of receivers who could, and a lot of offensive skill players who could fall to you at 9. So you're kind of in a dilemma. Do I want to pick one of those guys at 9? It's probably going to be these 3 names that we mentioned, Warren, Genty, and Tet. All 3 guys are guys that will have significant impacts in the NFL.
Yes.
But are you in such bad shape, talent-wise, that you want to go ahead and pass on one of those guys for the opportunity to trade down and acquire more picks so you can build up and get more choices to build your roster?
Well, and you and I both want to see them trade down. And I know it's a different, because they need so much, and because they're an elderly team. It's just you're at the stage now, especially with your salary cap, you absolutely need to build through the draft. And I know it's a new coaching regime, but it's the same general manager, and that same general manager has never ever traded back in 24 years. On the job. So if you're a betting man, I wouldn't recommend laying dollars that the Saints are going to trade back. And if a couple of those offensive players fall, I think it would be a different scenario if you had a defensive-minded head coach and you were in this position defensively, and the scenario you laid out played itself out where the top defenders on your board go and you have an offensive player there. A defensive-minded coach may still think, okay, I'm still going to take the top defender on my board because we need so much on that side. But with Kellen Moore being an offensive guy, if a Tyler Warren falls to him, and we know what he did with Dalton Schultz in Dallas, we know what he did with Dallas Goedert in Philadelphia. If an Ashton Genty falls to him, we know what he could do with running backs. And also, I love Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, and I think they're a terrific tandem. But Kellen Moore has had a big-bodied, playmaking wide receiver wherever he's been, and neither Olave or Shaheed are that. Tet could be your next CD Lamb, your next AJ Brown, your next Keenan Allen. And I know Keenan isn't a big guy, but he's a physical chain mover like those other guys.
Like Michael Thomas was.
Yeah, exactly. So if those top edge rushers and Will Johnson, the cornerback, are all off the board, Mason Graham, the defensive tackle from Michigan, too, would factor in there. All those guys are gone. There's a run on defensive players. then I think you could see Kellen Moore take one of those guys. Because like you said, they're going to be a difference maker for your team. You still get younger, you still get better, which is the ultimate goal of your number one draft choice.
Yeah, exactly. So that leads to my question. Here we go, Don. The coordinators that we have brought in on the defense are young college coaches. One's a local product, not Vance Joseph, but Terry Joseph. Went to Shaw, from the West Bank. The Joseph family were a big family at Shaw, just like the Forcades were. I agree. It's one of the weakest because you don't have a true number one. Like Calvin said, you don't have that physical guy.
Not as weak as safety hemisphere, but I digress.
But with these guys coming straight out of college and successful college programs, I mean, Texas, even Cal to an extent, do you think that kind of leads the Saints to maybe get more insight on some of the young college players that they may have not gotten in the past? Because these are coaches who just got finished coaching against or coaching some of these guys. I'm thinking about the Texas wide receivers, the Texas safeties, Cal, looking at some of the teams that Cal played against, I think they played Ohio State. I don't remember anymore. Yeah, I know Vance Joseph's his cousin. But yeah, one of the things that helped Jimmy Johnson build that Cowboys team so fast was that he had just come out of the college programs, and he was the number one team back then. So not only did he know what made his team work, he knew the teams he beat and the guys that gave him the most trouble and went after those guys too. So, I mean, do you see that this is one of the youngest staffs. Do you see maybe that playing out, especially on the defensive side, where we might see guys in the second and third round, even day 3 picks, may not be really ranked that high in the draft books, but for the coaches, they're like, oh, no, you want this guy. He gave us all kinds of trouble,
100%. That's the way I see it, and that's why I like the hires on the defensive side so far. And I will do an article profiling Peter Sermon, the new linebacker coach, tomorrow, just like I have the other assistants. We talked about how Kellen Moore has kind of had to scramble to put his staff together. With the combine, it's not even around the corner anymore. It's here
this weekend.
And your draft preparation, you as a staff, you're already behind most of the rest of the league because you're new on the job. Well, you bring in a linebacker coach at Cal. Well, Cal played in the ACC last year. You don't get me started on the conference bullshit, but Terry Joe,
12 team to me,
right? The NCAA's power to change geography of the entire universe just never ceases to amaze me. But you talk about Terry Joseph. Terry's been in Texas for the last 3 or 4 years, and it occurred to me too, and I mentioned this in an article. Terry was at Notre Dame before he came to Texas. One of the top corners, rated 3rd or 4th corner, is Notre Dame's cornerback Benjamin Morrison. Well, Terry Joseph recruited him. So, Terry Joseph, Peter Sermon's influence on, not only their own teams, Cal and Texas, but their opponents, as you mentioned, I think that's going to play a huge part. Kellen Moore's going to be the offensive czar. So the guys that he brought in under him are guys, Nussmeier and others that have either followed him throughout his career, or at least have worked with him. That's because Kellen already knows what he wants to do on the offensive side. When Brandon Staley was brought in, at first I thought, and I still think there's going to be 1 or 2 guys that have had working relationships with Staley, but I never thought I never stopped to think they're going to bring in college assistants on that side, because that's where they need to get younger more so than anywhere else. That's where they're going to need to focus in the draft more so than anyone else. Well, who better to do it, like you said, than the guys who coached some of these guys in the draft or coached against some of these guys in the draft? That's why I love these hires so far.
Absolutely. And that's the first thing I thought of. And yeah, Jimmy Johnson does have a huge influence in my thinking, because so much of he really sold people on the draft.
Yes.
I mean, you had the 74 Steelers draft, the 75 Cowboys Dirty Dozen draft, but for the most part, most teams seem to treat the draft as a secondary thing. That they built their team. They got some good draft picks, but they built their team more through trades than anything else. Very, very few teams were doing the drafting, especially in the 70s. Now, in the 80s, it kind of changed, because in the 80s, you had Bill Walsh. He had his philosophy, draft philosophy. And then you had, oh, come on. I can picture him from the Washington Redskins.
Gibbs.
Not Gibbs. No. The draft guru who also built the Chargers in 94.
Beathard.
Yeah, Bobby Beathard. Bobby Beathard had his philosophy, and it was always trades, always trading down in the draft, because he believed in volume. I get more picks, and it could be at the end of the draft, but it's more picks because it's more opportunities to find those guys to build my team. But you look at some of these draft trades they used to do, and it would blow your mind.
Yeah.
Because the value of first-round picks was almost non-existent. In fact, a lot of teams didn't even want the first-round pick because it was so much money you were going to spend on it. So, Jimmy Johnson came in, created the point value chart, and the point value chart now determined whether or not you were getting a fair trade for picks. So he would assign a random number as the number one overall pick, and then he would deduct points for each pick, successive pick per round. So now to get like the 9th pick overall, I think the latest chart I saw was that pick is worth 1,350 points. So if Denver, for example, Sean Payton wanted to trade up to 9, his pick, I think, is only worth, let me just double check my math here because I've got the chart. I think his pick is worth 1,000 points, but I'm not positive on that. Because the math turned out that he had to give up his first-round pick and his second-round pick, and he still owed us points. Okay, the 20th pick is worth 850 points. The 9th pick is worth 1,350. So for him to move up from 20 to 9, he had to take the first round pick, 850, his second round pick, which was 390, and now he's still owed like 100 something points. Well, that is roughly, that's the middle of the third round. He doesn't have that pick. So he either would have to give up a player or he would have to, combine some lower level picks to get that final digit. So, and that would be a quote unquote fair trade if they're using the same point value chart. So now you start seeing, okay, first round, second round worth that, 2 firsts given up for a player, 1 this year, 1 next year. You're guessing what that point value is for that other first round pick, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I'm going to bring this one up in just a second here, Flavor Dave, because I have an opinion on this. So that's something just to think about. I don't think I want to trade all the way down to 20, though, because I think that takes us too far away from the elite level players. I would rather trade with although I like the idea of getting an extra second round pick. but I think I would rather trade maybe just a couple slots, maybe with Dallas, maybe Miami at the lowest, and that's Miami's 13th. And pick up maybe not a second round pick, but you're probably picking up a third with that. So, so speaking of trades, what do you think about this scenario? Trading Olave while he still has value and pick up more picks.
I don't like it because what you're doing then, you've created a bigger hole. And you already have needs throughout the entire team. Unavoidable needs: edge rusher, big-bodied interior defender, linebacker youth, safety, guard, and now you created a larger hole at wide receiver. If you could get a first-round pick for Olave, that's a different story. A first-round pick and maybe a mid-round pick. I might consider it then, because the Saints do, remember, have to make a decision on whether to pick up Chris Olave's fifth-year option this spring before May. And that's a big decision. They have the same decision to make with Trevor Penning too, by the way. But with Olave, I know some people are saying that that Olave isn't a number one receiver. Okay, but he's better than what most teams have. When he's healthy, he's 1,000-yard receiver. He's a big play artist. He can move the chains. He's a good route runner. He's not great, but he's a good route runner. To me, unless you I'm not saying Chris Olave is untradeable, but I don't trade him unless I get blown out of the water with an offer. And when for me, getting blown out of the water would be, you give me a first-round pick and 2 mid-round picks. One, this year, your famous saying, give me something else in the top 100, and a conditional pick next year. At that point, I'm probably going to take it, because then I can get a Tet or a Luther Bolden in the first round and still address a defensive need.
Oh, Jerry. My feeling is, if someone is willing to give me what I think his value is, I'm going to make the trade. Unfortunately, his value is going to be extremely low because he is coming off of an injury and his concussion. So it's not like an injury, like an obvious, like a knee injury that you can see, okay, there's recovery. He's going to break through that and he should be good. And he's not going to have the value of Brandon Cooks, who you did get a number one pick for, because you probably could have done that last year at the end of 2023 because he was a 1,000-yard receiver. He looked like an up-and-coming player. But you will have that issue of, you're going to make a decision. Are you going to pay this guy? Are you going to pay this guy? And you're going to have to pick up his option year next year. Or are you going to pay him after that? Now, if he shows he can stay healthy and plays all 17 games, has another 1,000-yard receiving season, and maybe just doubles his touchdown total he's got 5 averages, but maybe 9 or 10 TDs, then you might be able to sell that. You can move him for extra picks in 2026. My biggest concern is this is probably his lowest value now because of the injury. I'm willing to trade him because I think you can take a step back to take us 2 steps forward. But you're not going to get that kind of value for him right now. And that's the problem. So I'm not sure. I'm still not sure if I want to pay this guy. I'm leaning towards no, just because of the concussion history. And I almost would rather pay, and you're not going to pay him nearly as much, but I'm almost would rather pay Shaheed.
100%. Yes.
Shaheed's the better receiver of the 2.
Yeah.
Just because he's just shown more. Olave is not a Justin Jefferson, a Jamar Chase, a Puka Nacua. He's not a difference maker. He's a nice piece. He reminds me of Deshaun Jackson to an
Yeah.
extent, a nicer Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah.
You're not dealing with the bullshit that you deal with Deshaun Jackson. But he's not a guy you're going to build your offense around. He's not the guy you're going to be looking at to run the shallow crosses over the middle like you did with Joe Horn, like you did with Eric Martin, like you did with Marcus Colston, and like you did with Michael Thomas, And unfortunately, those are the receivers who get paid. The guys who run those shallow crosses, take the shots in the middle of the field, bounce up with the ball in their hand it to the ref, and let's go. I'm going again. See if you can stop me. And you're right, Calvin. And that's what I mean by he's not the guy that offensive and defensive coordinators stay up at night going,
right,
how can we contain him? We know we can't stop him. How can we contain him? He's not Randy Moss. He's not that kind of receiver. That doesn't mean he's not a good receiver, because Deshaun Jackson clearly is or was. The kid that was with Minnesota who caught the Minneapolis Miracle, Stephon Diggs. He's a good piece. He's not going to be a difference maker, though. He's not going to be he couldn't be the number one receiver. He liked to think he was, but he needed a complimentary piece. This is a good. Let's go to this transition here. Hemisphere says, we spoke last week about a 34 defense. Is there anyone else in the linebacker group that might be cut out for the inside position in the 34? Ford, Sewell, and Foskey maybe as an outside linebacker. Is it time to cut DeMario and Pete Werner? I don't think you can cut them both.
No, because we just got done talking about Olave. If you cut bait with Olave, you've just created a larger hole. You cut bait with either DeMario or Warner, let alone both. You've just created a grand can. You've created a meteor crater. Yeah. Because Ford, I like Ford, and I think he's going to fit well in his system. The Saints like Ford. That's why they kept him on the active roster and didn't even attempt to subject him to the practice squad because they knew he'd get poached. So I think Ford. And I grant you that's under previous regime. But Ford has talent, and this organization knew it. They love Sewell. I don't know why, but they do. Sewell can be an inside guy. He's a heady player. He doesn't have a lot of athleticism. He's kind of like a poor man's Pete Werner. But Sewell will have a fit in this system. I'm interested to see if Foskey can be a guy at outside linebacker, at rush linebacker. You don't want Isaiah dropping back in coverage like ever. But you free him up. You give him a step or two away from those tackles where he could get a running start and set up a move. Maybe Foskey has some value. This is going to be his last chance to show it. But no, DeMario Davis and Pete Werner are absolutely needed on this team. But I also think even with my expected development of Jalen Ford, I still think you have to get younger at linebacker, if nothing else. So I do expect, if they don't go Walker, the other linebacker, edge kid from Georgia, who was working out a lot as off-ball linebacker for the Bulldogs too. If he's not your pick at number 9, then I absolutely think the Saints need to go linebacker in day 2.
Yeah, I mean, to me, you're looking at a team. DeMario's, on his way out. Maybe Pete Warner doesn't make it, but you got to get the replacements on the team first before you start getting rid of guys. Just because this is my argument, and I didn't want to get into this, but this has always been my argument with Carr, for example. I'm fine with moving on from Carr, but let's get pieces in place first, then move on. Don't create a hole. It's like what you said with Olave. Don't create a hole that you're going to have to address right away. you want to go ahead and get pieces set unless you get something in return where you can use to fill that hole and get another player. You know, the Jimmy Graham trade, as much as I dislike it, the Jimmy Graham trade turned one player into two. You got a starting center and you got a number one draft pick. The fact that you set that number one draft pick on fire is irrelevant. You did get a number one draft pick and a Pro Bowl player. So you converted one player into two. It would have to be that way with DeMario and Pete Werner and Chris Olave. You have to if you're going to get rid of these guys, you've got to figure out a way to turn that one player into two players. So a player and a pick, something like that. You can't just cut bait with them just because they're expensive or just because they may or may not fit your defense right now. That's why I think it's really interesting to see what happens in this draft, because that's the first step. We're not going to have the money in free agency to sign free agents. It's got to come from the draft. So get these rookies in here and let them compete and see if they can push these people out the door. I mean, we've only been saying that, I don't know, since, past 2 years.
Yeah.
You're over the cap because you didn't get guys that could push these other players out. Or you didn't have coaches who believe that these guys could push the other players out. For those of y'all screaming Zach Bond at me right now, you didn't get players that people believe could push these guys out, DeMario and Cam and Tyrann Mathieu, Okay, so one other position. We talked a little bit about the Texas coordinator, the Shaw graduate and everything else. Do you think that if Will Campbell is there at 9, do you make that move for Will Campbell then? The cornerback.
If you do not re-sign Paulson Adebo, and I do think he's going to be difficult to re-sign, then cornerback is a need. Now, I think you can get away with, you have a good duo in Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry, but without Paulson Adebo, you have no depth. Don't tell me Rico Payton. I like Rico, but he's no better than a fourth corner and a special teamer. So unless you're going to go out and get like a mid-tier free agent, and I'm thinking a guy like Asante Samuel, Benjamin St-Juste, somebody like that can step in and be a third corner or at least be competent in the slot. If that Michigan corner is there at 9, and I think it's a strong possibility he won't be. He's a true shutdown corner. And now you get to pair him up with Kool-Aid on the outside, and you get to move Alontae around the formation, where Alontae was really a disruptive force through the first half of the year. I recognize the bigger need at edge rusher, the bigger need at safety, quite frankly. And the need at defensive tackle and those other positions, but just like we talked about with Tyler Warren and Genty, if you have a legitimate shutdown corner on the board and you have a chance to get them, that's tough to turn away, man.
Well, and then Calvin, in this scenario, Mason Graham's already off the board.
Oh yeah, I assume he is going to be. I'd love Mason Graham too, but I assume he's gone.
Yeah. I'm just talking about if most of the guys that you want are gone and you're left with Will Campbell, do you take him? Because I'll be honest with you, I think the Jets take Mason Graham because I think that fits right in the wheelhouse of Aaron Glenn.
Yeah.
If Aaron Glenn was our head coach, like the Saints wanted, this is going to be a purely defensive draft. You're going to think Dennis Allen never left. I hate to say it like that, from a philosophical standpoint. You were going to get a coach that was going to go out there and build his team, build the trenches, and was going to win with defense. And that's his philosophy is going to be with the Jets. It's going to be win with defense. So I don't know what how this is going to play out for the Saints. I'm wondering if a defensive player is the guy they take off at 9, or is he going to, if he sees an offensive player, he's just going to jump on him. You know, I really don't think that's going to be a tackle. I just don't have that feeling. I think it's just that's a want, not a need.
Yeah.
The needs are guys that, I know Calvin keeps beating the drum, but, the big body defensive tackle, nose tackle, you got to get somebody big in there to handle the 2 gap, line up over the center. Offensive skill players, elite offensive skill players, an edge rusher. I just think those are the 3 top targets right now for the Saints, because that's what they're looking at. And, we hear a lot of talk about quarterbacks. Jackson Dart is somebody that the fans keep mocking to the Saints. Although it's slowly turning, which I expected this, the more people make the Jalen Hurts, Jalen Milroe comparisons, the more they're going to be like, oh, look, if we get Genty at 9 and we get Milroe at 40, we got Hurts and we have not Asante Samuel, Saquon Barkley reincarnated out in New Orleans.
Yeah.
So many people coming over from Philadelphia. Why not build the Saints to be like Philadelphia? I just can't see it. I've done that mock where I've had those 2 guys at 9 and at 40. But I think that also sets the Saints back as far as defensive needs, because now you make it so much harder to get the edge rusher. You make it so much harder to get that nose tackle, and you can't get a linebacker or a corner or a safety. You run out of picks.
Yep.
Every mock I've done where I try and address skill players early, offensive skill players early for this team, there's a run on offensive linemen, and there's a run on defensive front 7 players.
Yep.
And I can't get any of them.
Yep.
So it require me to draft or trade down so many times to try and get just a volume number of picks to even address the position. And I end up with guys like Stewart from Texas A&M, who I don't like the comparisons they make to, God dang, I need to write these names down. I can tell I've not done any show prep on this. The edge rusher who made his whole career off of one tackle in college. He became a number 1
Clowney.
Pick. Clowney. I've seen a lot of comparisons between Stewart and Clowney, and I'm like, yeah, I don't need that. I really don't need that. So that's the hard part. To me, if we're going to be trading down, or we're going to be drafting players, as much as I like getting the skill players, somewhere along the way in the top 100, you have to address edge rusher, defensive tackle, offensive guard, tight end, wide receiver, running back. You run out of positions. You run out of picks because there's so many needs. So day 3, you can start worrying about depth, and you bring in your 3rd tackle. You're bringing in, and we haven't really addressed the safety position, but you're looking at day 3 now on safety. Well, that's what you got right now out there.
And the mocks that I keep playing around with, and I actually really kind of released my first one yesterday or day before. I just did a 3-rounder because I'm still waiting for the compensatory picks to be announced before I do the full draft. But I addressed safety with the 2nd round pick. I went Xavier Watts, the safety from Notre Dame. I love that kid, by the way. Because I keep coming back to that. I know, and you and I have been screaming as long as we've known each other, screaming for the Saints to draft a tight end, draft and develop a pass catching tight end. I do think they do that. I don't think it's going to be Tyler Warren, as much as I love it, because I keep coming back to this. remember, folks, how bad this defense was last year. It was bad. It was awful. Offensively, they were just bombarded by injuries. I mean, there were still holes there. You still need a guard, at least one guard. You still need a big bodied wide out. And yes, a tight end would be nice. But this offense, when it was healthy, moved the ball, put points on the board. Yeah, with your Derek Carr at quarterback and without your big bodied wide receiver, Kellen Moore has enough pieces here to put together a serviceable offense while they rebuild the defense. Again, I don't think that they're going to ignore the offensive side altogether, nor should they. But these coaches they brought in, they aren't dumb. They know, they've seen the Saints. Kellen Moore played against the Saints last year. He knows how bad this defense is, and he knows that that's the first thing that's got to be rebuilt through this draft.
Exactly. That's why I've done a couple mocks where I went heavy on defense early, took a defensive end early, took a linebacker, I think, in the second round, and I took a running back and a defensive tackle. No, I'm sorry, running back, a linebacker, and defensive tackle, because I had 2/3. Took a defensive tackle in the fourth round, and it wasn't Walker, but it was a big body. I think it was Cam Jackson, maybe, someone like that. It was a pretty wide ass. You know, I just looked up and I said, does he eat 2 gaps? That's what I need right there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I rebuilt my front seven. And then I think in the 5th round, I didn't have a 5th round. No, I did get a 5th round pick because I traded down my 4th. I picked up a 5th. Then I picked up a couple 6. For some reason, San Francisco gave me a bunch of 6th-round picks they had. I think it was San Francisco, but I ended up having 3 6th-round picks. So I was able to get some other players. I got a guard. I got my backup tackle and stuff like that. So, you know, I kind of addressed nothing but needs in that draft. Ended up with 2 wide receivers in it, but they were both late. One was a kid from Maryland, and the other one was the kid from Colorado, Will Shepard, who I'm always drafting at 245. For some reason, they hate him. He was rated so low in the draft. I'm like, that's the only kid on Colorado who I thought consistently caught the ball that was a pure wide receiver.
Thank you. I agree. But yeah, they hate him. They hate him. And the one that kept popping up for me late in the 7th round was Donovan Edwards, the running back from Michigan.
Yeah.
Who's a little bit inconsistent, but he catches the ball out of the backfield. He's a big play waiting to happen. That's when I address my offensive skill. Now I went Arroyo, the Miami tight end, with one of my 3rd round picks in my mock. There's a big, in my opinion, there's a big drop off at tight end after him. But I put him in the group.
Before him. I've gotten the kid from Texas. The kid from Texas in my 4th round a couple times too, as my tight end, because it's just like Royal, big body, pass catcher, growing as a receiver and a blocker, and I'm just like, let's roll with him. I can go with him, Jamal, and the LSU kid Morrow. Just kind of go with those 3 for now. But I mean, same thing. I'm amazed at some of the players that slide as far as they slide, and I think this is going to change after the combo this weekend. Because someone's going to blow people away with his workout. He's going to bench press 475 pounds, 500 pounds. And they're like, oh my God, he looks awesome and running around in underwear. Let's make him a 2nd round pick, and he's not. We'll go full Malamula on him. The kid from Boston College who had the big workout. It's funny as I go through these things, and I notice a trend in all these mocks. I've tried different mocks, mock simulators, and I've noticed a trend. There are certain players they hate, and they fall all the time. So I'm like, why not? I'm going to get him at the end of the draft. I'm not addressing that position yet. What do you think of the 2 Ohio State running backs?
I love them both. I love them both, and I think they're probably both day two, maybe
Mm-hmm.
late day two.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to bolster your backfield, either one of them would do it. Now, I happen to like Henderson a little bit more than than Judkins, only because I thought Henderson did more for Ohio State last year. When Judkins transferred from Mississippi, I was like, oh my God, he is going to be unstoppable. Because unlike that idiot Lane Kiffin, the Buckeyes are going to use him. I mean, the Buckeyes did, kind of a backfield tandem, but Henderson was the one that kept making plays. But I do think that both of these guys are going to be very good NFL backs. I like running back in this draft. There's a kid from Iowa. There's a kid from, I want to say, Kentucky. Miami, Florida has one in there. I mentioned Donovan Edwards he's going to be a day 3 pick, but he's going to stick on someone's roster. I do think the Saints are going to get a running back in this draft because, I mean, they're aware of Kamara's situation. And if you get a good back now and you have a good backfield tandem, then all of a sudden next year at this time, maybe you're talking about dangling Alvin Kamara for a first-round pick somewhere because you have another capable back. I'm reaching here, I realize, but remember the Saints drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry last year when they had a full and talented cornerback room. Now, you were doing the draft show with Brendan and myself, as you usually do. We all said, well, this for sure means that Lattimore or Adebo are not going to be on the team next year. A good team, smart coaches, and you mentioned Bill Walsh. This is the way Bill Walsh drafted. Well, Dwight Clark's getting up there in years. I'm going to trade up for Jerry Rice. That's just the way Bill Walsh thought. Good coaches, even those who are building their team, think of things this way. Running backs tend to fall off a cliff quick. Alvin is not yet, knock on wood, but it's not dumb to prepare for the possibility that he does. Now, if the Saints do go running back as early as day 2, again, we talk about all the other needs on this team. I think that that's where they're going to start wheeling and dealing. Okay, we're going to maybe trade back from 40 in the second round to 52, pick up an extra third and an extra fourth, and that's where we're going to get our wide receiver. That's where we're going to get our running back. Kind of extra money to play. When you find extra money on the street, what do you want to do? You want to spend it right away. That's the way I see this draft playing out if they go running back or wide receiver in day 2.
Yeah, and that's definitely been my philosophy in these mocks that I've done. I've traded down for extra second, third, fourth round picks because as always, and I say this every year, that's the meat of the draft. That's where you get the meat on your bones. You think about the 2017 draft. How many third round picks did they have? They had 4 third round picks, I think?
I think so.
Because you had Kamara. I know Hendrickson was the last one. I think they had 2 in between.
Kamara, Anzalone, and Hendrickson, and we're forgetting somebody. You're right.
Yeah, there's somebody else in there that they drafted in the middle of the third round, and I cannot remember who it is. But I know. So you had 2 firsts, a second.
That was Marcus Williams.
And then you had your third round picks, and I cannot remember who they are. I have to go back and look at it. We could be wrong. Could be 3 third round picks. I could have sworn it was 4, but I'll look real quick because I can do that. Let's see. All right, Lattimore, Ramchak, Marcus Williams, Kamara, Hendrickson, and Alexander Zalone. So it was 3 in the third. Okay, it was 3 in the third. Because Muhammad, Al-Qadim Muhammad was a 6th round pick. But yeah, okay. All right, so it was 3 in the third. Okay. I think they may have had 4 in the beginning, and they traded up. I know they traded up to get Kamara,
Mm.
but yeah, Brian Russell's got some names. I like Junkins. Everyone loves Scatterboo because of the bowl game and reminding them of Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
Etienne, I'm kind of on the fence on him.
I loved him at Florida. I thought he was
Yeah.
going to do bigger things when he transferred, and just like Judkins, he disappointed me a little bit.
Yeah. I'm kind of the opposite of you with Junkins. I like Junkins a little bit better than Henderson, but I love them both. Henderson reminds me of Pierre Thomas.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. He really reminds me of Pierre Thomas. But I do want a power back. I want somebody who can run between the tackles and get the tough yards. Jamal Williams can get kicked to the curb. Kendre Miller,
I think Kendre Miller just got hurt during that sentence.
Exactly. I think he's going to get every opportunity, but there's no way on earth I'm counting on him at all, even surviving training camp. I think, honestly, they bring a lot of backs. I think they draft at least one, maybe two, depending on how many picks they have at the end. And I think that they kind of look at the free agent and the undrafted free agent market to go bring him back. Just competition, yeah.
He did. Ollie Matson. All right. Ollie something. I in my first mock draft that simulator. I ended up grabbing him in the 5th or 6th round, and I'm like, there's great value here. And Oklahoma State was just awful last year, but Ollie led the nation in rushing the year before that. So I mean, unless there's something going on there that we don't know about, he's a capable back. But that's a guy that might all of a sudden tumble all the way out of the draft because of his production last year. Now all of a sudden you're bringing him in with a chip on his shoulder as an undrafted college kid.
Yeah, exactly. Calvin brings up an interesting comment about Kendre Miller. So the Saints hired a trainer. They call it sports science. Yeah. He was the league's, I don't know what the award was, but rated the highest and won an award for being the best trainer, essentially. Yeah, you cannot prevent knee injuries, broken bones, that kind of thing, but the soft tissue stuff. The Eagles used to lead the league in injuries until they brought this guy in, and they let him go. They let him go last year. But when he was there, he reversed the Eagles' injury problems. Is this guy going to be the guy to turn the corner on the Saints' injury history?
Well, I mean, only time will tell. They had to do something here. And like you said, you look at the Saints' injuries last year. McCoy's first injury couldn't be helped. Adebo had a broken leg. Ford had a broken leg. Taysom's knee injury. Kamara's groin injury. Carr's hand. But the other guy, the Kendre Millers, the Lucas Patricks, the soft tissue injuries that we see throughout the league. Other guys are back in 2-3 weeks. These guys are missing 8 and 9 weeks, or coming back in 6 weeks, getting injured again, and missing 4 or 5 more weeks. You can't help but question the desire of the player to play with pain. Sometimes, and I'm there with Kendre Miller. But you also kind of have to point a question mark in the direction of the training staff as well.
Yeah.
What's going on inside that building? How conditioned are these guys? Because if these guys, younger guys, it'd be different if Cam or DeMario at 30 something years old are getting these.
And they're not. That's what's funny.
And they're not, right?
They're not.
Because they take care of their body. They have their own people all year. Kamara has his own people all year round. And more often than not, that's why they're missing OTAs, because they're still with their own people. It's the guys that have been in the building, and we pat them on the back in May and June. Oh, yeah, they've been here the whole time. Where is so-and-so? Well, those are the guys that are getting hurt and staying out. So, bringing in Rath, and I'm assuming Rath will probably have his own staff too. I'm of the philosophy is, what could it hurt at this point?
Yeah, my biggest thing was, some of it is bad luck. Broken bones, bad luck. Knee injuries, bad luck. Concussions to an extent. Much was made about Olave's second concussion, the one that really pretty much ended his season. But 4 flags came out on that play. That was a dirty, cheap shot. They went straight for the head on that one. They were willing to take the penalty to take him out of the game, because they knew, going back to Greg Williams' infamous speech, cut the snake off at the head, and that's exactly what the Panthers did. Yeah. They were willing to take the penalty because they knew this guy is susceptible to concussions. We're going to take him out early. Sean Payton did it to the Eagles back in 2018. What did he do? He ran a screen pass with blockers in front directly at the cornerback, who was coming off of a major injury, and took him out within 2 plays because he knew he didn't want to get hit. And he bragged about it to Sports Illustrated, and Peter King. So this is a gamemanship. They know, and that's why I feel like, Olave is going to have a target on his back. So that's why I'm not counting on this guy. They're going to go after him to see if you don't have that guardian cap on. Let's see if you can take a hit, because don't like you can. And we're going to come up high. And if we get a flag, so be it. We know you're going out to the blue tent, never to be seen again. So, yeah. The DE from Marshall, the defensive end from Marshall, I don't know enough about him to say who is he, if he's that important to Marcus Ware.
It's way too early to tell. But Mike Green is easily the fastest riser at this position on the draft board. And a lot of mock drafts have him going in the top 12 right now. A couple to the Saints I saw. If you put yourself in the New Orleans position, Isaiah Foskey came from Notre Dame, so that's a big school. He was playing top tier competition, but at Marcus Davenport, even Peyton Turner, at the University of Houston, Houston had a softer schedule. They weren't in a Power 5 conference then, I don't believe, or if they were, I don't think they were. So if you're looking at a Mike Green, and you already have PTSD about Davenport and Turner, why are you looking at Mike Green? I've seen the film, and he looks like a wonderful player. He looks raw to me. Davenport, like, wonderful natural ability, but I don't see, when he does get engaged, I don't see a lot of counter moves. When he does play up against a bigger tackle, that uses decent technique. I'm not going to say he gets overpowered, but he no longer looks like a varsity kid playing against the JV team. And a lot of Marshall's opponents, that's exactly what Mike Green looks like. If it's me, I look at the 2 Georgia kids. I look at Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. I'm even looking at James Pierce at Tennessee before I do Mike Green. If all those other guys are gone and Mike Green's your only edge rusher left, I think at that point you either take an offensive guy, if it's Genty or Ty Warren, or if you're like, okay, I'm going to take Mike Green, but let's move back to like 14, where I think he's still going to be, to get him. I'm still taking a chance, but at least I'm picking up more picks. That's the way I feel about Mike Green.
In defense of Davenport, this guy was an athletic freak.
Mm-hmm.
Extremely long arms, wide, big body kid. I think he was like 6'6", 6'7", something ridiculous as far as his height. That was part of the appeal of Davenport and why so many draft projections had him going around the place where the Saints took him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because he was seen as a guy who was more like Javon. I think this is right. Javon Curse.
Yeah.
The freak.
Yeah.
He was seen as somebody who was going to be a difference maker out there. And he had the long arms and so forth that could knock down passes and do, make the big plays. They did not see, he just never developed into that guy. Looking back at the film, you can see he's the big fish in a small pond. But like you said about Green, the lack of counter moves, the lack of a lot of tools in his toolkit, pass rushing toolkit, beyond just being somebody who's bigger and stronger than the guys he's going up against.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the problem. And that's what we found out with Davenport, that and his inability to play through pain.
Yeah.
He had a very low pain threshold, and that's really what killed him. Genty. Yeah, well, I think a lot of people went sour on Genty because of how Penn State really handled him. And I think that's also a comment on the limitations of the Boise State offense.
Mm-hmm.
They knew we can put 8, 9 guys in the box because we don't fear this quarterback at all because he hasn't had to throw. So I think my worry with the running back from Boise State is that if you get too many carries in college, it's going to shorten your career as a pro. You only have so many carries in you. You can only take so many hits. And running backs always talk about that. If it gets over 350, if you start pushing 400 touches, 400 carries in a season, that shortens your career. And you look at guys who had monster years, and then the next year, because they got so many carries, their production went down. And I'm thinking like Larry Johnson. I'm thinking of I just drew a blank on his name. I had it a second ago before I said Larry Johnson. The Atlanta running back, Jamal Anderson. Those two guys. I know I'm looking at you.
Sorry.
Fading on me.
I am. I got to jump.
I know. We're going to wrap it up here. Real quick. When's you have the Bayou Blitz coming on tomorrow night or Thursday night?
We're going tomorrow night, unless Brandon hits me with a curveball at the last minute. So we'll be on tomorrow night at 8 p.m. You guys' time, 8 p.m. Central. Some of the combine interviews are going to start tomorrow. John Hendricks is there, so I've been in touch with him. We'll have a little bit to talk about that. The Saints have already had scheduled a meeting with Ashton Genty, by the way. So we'll get some more meetings to come out of there. The workouts themselves do not start until Friday, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So we'll talk about what some of the things that we expect to see from different players that we've talked about tonight. At the combine, how it might affect their draft status too, for better or for worse. If you buy into that thing, and a lot of NFL scouts still do.
Right, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I want to talk about, like the defensive end for Marshall, for example. Davenport shot way up after the combine. Maliamula for the Eagles is the Boston College kid is the most famous example of the workout warrior. So, my caution is, and that's why we talked about these players tonight. My caution is keep these things in context when it gets to these guys running around in underwear, because they're not doing football things. They can run fast, they can jump real high, they can run the cone drills, but when they put on pads and get hit and get hurt, are they still good players?
Right.
So that's what you always have to remember with the combine. And I think this year we're finally going to see the Saints kind of push aside the workout warriors that they've been drafting lately, and probably drafting better football players because of the younger coaches and that kind of stuff. So Bayou Blitz tomorrow night, 8 o'clock Central Time, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. We'll be back next week after the combine. We'll be talking about free agency, because now we're going to start seeing the Saints having to make moves to get under the cap. Now they've got the coaching staff intact. Does that involve restructuring Carr? Does that involve not restructuring him, trying to leave his contract alone and restructuring a bunch of other people? How do they get under the $40 million? So check out the Bayou Blitz tomorrow night, and we'll see you next week on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.
Good night.